And now, Deep Thoughts by Brad and Gary.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week we're doing something a little different for us and it's not totally SNL related, but today, October 23rd, would be the 100th birthday of one of the all-time late night greats, Brad.
Chevy Chase?
No, greats, I said. Greats.
Oh, sorry.
This would be Johnny Carson's 100th birthday.
Right.
And the best way I can think to commemorate that is to talk to someone who knows far more about Johnny Carson than probably anyone except Johnny Carson.
Anyone I know, yeah. We're excited to have back with us a dear friend. His voice may sound familiar to you. He's currently the host of the podcast Inside Late Night. In addition, he's been a guest with us in the past. We had him back when we covered season 3 SNL, Michael Sarazan episode. Also with us when we did the SNL 25th anniversary celebration. And not only is he a wealth of Saturday Night Live knowledge, but all things late night, Letterman, Conan, and, obviously and most notably, I'd say Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. His first podcast, The Carson Podcast, ran for over 8 years. We're on over 300 episodes. He spoke to anyone he could find associated with Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. Writers, crew members, bookers, comedians, celebrities, you name it. The list of folks he talked to is unparalleled. Carol Burnett, Dick Cavett, Chevy Chase, Buck Henry, Mel Brooks, Dana Carr. I can't even scratch the surface. He's the author of a new book, Love Johnny Carson, just came out a couple days ago. It's a fantastic book, I think, for aficionados of the show, as well as just comedy fans who might not know the inner workings of Carson's 3 decades behind the desk, which I kind of forgot before I read the book that he was behind there that long. We're excited to have with us an old friend and author now, Mark Malkoff. Hey, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Nice to see you both.
Thanks for joining us, Mark. This is great. I mean, just the amount of work that you did on this book is outstanding, and the book is really great. It's so much fun to read.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I can't believe I know more about Johnny Carson than my wife. I've been married 20 years, and I far more know about Johnny Carson. It was just not intentional. I got to do some damage control after the last 4 years of all Carson, and then the 8 years of the podcast. But yeah, I still can't believe I've talked to over 400 people for the book and for the podcast.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Let's go back to the very beginning, and you talk about this in the foreword, but I think it's a really great question that people would have, which is, how did you become such a fan of Johnny Carson?
My dad just got me into comedy really early. I mean, I was watching It's a Mad World.
Oh, nice.
I think I missed one of the Mads. So I knew who a lot of those iconic comedians were that were older already. And my dad, I think it was like a Friday night. I got to stay up a little late, watch Johnny. And then, we had VHS and they had those primetime anniversary shows every year with Johnny, and they would clips. And there was just something so much fun about that show and about, just like show business legends and just kind of my introduction in terms of what adults found funny. And some of the stuff as a kid was just over my head, but it was just so much fun to see all the people that Johnny would bring on the show, people that were famous, people that weren't famous. He could talk to everyone, the animals, he talk to kids, senior citizens. But there was just something wonderful. He got me into that. He got me into early Saturday Night Live as well in the 70s, but he told me that anything after the first 5 years wasn't funny, so I did not give it anything a chance. I thought Dana Carvey was so funny on Johnny's anniversary show, but I really didn't know Dick Carvey's work because my dad's like, no, trust me. And then, of course, I start watching SNL in like 1989, 1990, and I'm like, he lied to me. Dana Carvey's brilliant. Phil Hartman, it's the greatest group ever. So he had good taste, and then some of his taste was not accurate, but he definitely got me into Jonathan Winters, Carson, all that Rodney Dangerfield stuff pretty early.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's some of the best. It's still in my mind some of the best comedy ever is that group that you're talking about in that era.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And then just like the whole Saturday Night Live parallel, just, obviously Dick Ebersol and Lorne Michaels having to go to Johnny Carson to get permission for Saturday Night Live from Carson. And that SNL Robert Smigel sketches partially doing Johnny in and deciding to get out. Jane Curtin doing an update joke on Johnny making fun of their show in 1977, and Chevy, after I think it was 8 episodes, he was on the cover of New York Magazine, heralded as Johnny's successor,
Right.
and Johnny just not being happy about that. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of Saturday Night Live stuff that we go into in the book, a little bit more in depth about Chevy, Johnny, happy ending. I mean, they became friends and hung out. And I mean, Chevy was one of those people that the people I talked to that spent time with Johnny that were really friends would told me the same thing. And Chevy said the same thing, which is that he was almost the same person you would see that hosted the Tonight Show. If he was comfortable with you and spent time with you, there wasn't much of a difference. Maybe a little less gregarious, but I thought that was pretty big revelation because the media made him out to be this cold and aloof guy. He had to protect himself. Everyone wanted a piece of him, and constant FBI were with him just because of threats on his life. So it was a complicated guy, but it was fun to really go into the history of the show and tell the stories.
I wanted to hit upon before we get into the book itself, because you did spend, as you mentioned, so many years on the podcast. That's where I first found you. We've talked about this before. Admittedly, not the biggest Johnny Carson fan in the world, but when I started listening to podcasts back in the day and found yours, as I mentioned, the number of guests that you have, and amazing guests that would open up and talk, were so great. And for any of our listeners who might not be familiar with the podcast, the Carson podcast, just wanted to ask you how you started that and began that journey of telling Johnny's story.
I feel like I got in at the right time. Now asking famous people to do a podcast is like them being on jury duty. They're asked to do podcast all the time. They have to do their friends' podcast. But this is, I started in 2012 and I released the podcast starting in 2013. I still had to explain what a podcast was to people. It was still a new thing, but I didn't realize that everybody would want to talk to talk about Johnny Carson. I mean, the people, it wasn't a reflection of me. I mean, I knew some of the people, but it was like that they loved Johnny. I just had so many questions about what went on behind the scenes, because for a show that was that iconic and for him to be that famous for 30 years, just really changing television, there was a lack of information out there. And I just felt, I still feel that way about Saturday Night Live with certain aspects of it as well, is why I have a podcast now with Late Nighter, to get some of those stories. I just had a cast member that I talked to and got a bunch of things I wanted to know. So with Carson, it seemed to me that for somebody that famous, there just were stories to be told. And I had no idea that all these people would want to talk to me. It was just, I think the timing was right. And also I have to point out that I couldn't do anything remote like this unless it was a phoner, and I didn't want to do it because of bad audio. I did a couple phone people, just that they said that's the only way I'll talk to you is phone. But I was in LA and people's homes. I'd say I can come directly to you, or we could do it nearby. But I'm with Carl Reiner in his Beverly Hills home. I'm with Paul Anka at his home and surrounded by all his gold records. I'm with Angie Dickinson hanging out in her Beverly Hills home. So this whole thing was so unexpected, and I didn't expect it to be an 8-year journey, let alone a book called Love Johnny Carson. I mean, before I started doing this, I really kind of thought, some of the negative books and Joan Rivers and a few, less than a handful of people that had some bad things to say about him. It never occurred to me that the people that I talked to would say, I love Johnny Carson. The people that knew him, I love Johnny Carson, which to me, that's what the title means. That's where it came from. To me, that's what it means to me, is so many people say, I love Johnny Carson. So that's the title.
Mark, honestly, we could do a whole book or podcast about your journey through making this podcast because it's amazing so nice in and of itself. But that being said, how did the book come about? Did someone reach out to you to do it? Did you just decide you have all of this, wealth of knowledge, you should put it down?
There were a lot of people saying I should do a book, and I kind of ignored it for a while because I just didn't want to do it. But I kind of believe that enough people are pointing something out, and it was just for so many years and so many people that maybe they were on to something. So I envisioned the book originally as an oral history, and I tried to do it as an oral history. And I had a literary agent, and we sent it out to all the big publishers, all the publishers really, and nobody wanted it. It was rejected by every single place. They said that older people that would buy this book do not buy oral histories. So it was like a month of my life putting this book proposal together, which is fine. It's just how life goes. So yeah, it went absolutely nowhere. And then um, the podcast ended, and I had all this, all this information, and I just the whole notion of writing a book. It just seems so overwhelming, especially someone that has like the poster boy for ADHD. I was just like, I can't do this. So what I did is I contacted 6 well-known authors. I've been saying that I didn't know any of them. I knew one of them, but the rest I didn't know, and I just cold reached out to them. I was able to reach 4 of them. One I knew, or 2 I knew a little bit. One I knew a little bit, but a lot of them I didn't know, or some of them I didn't know. And I said, listen, I've talked to over 400, close to 400 people at this point. I have all this information about the show. I think that it's a book. I think it would be valuable, but I need somebody, one of you that has done this so many times, just to talk me through it, to be an editor, just talk me through the whole process, because it's just I'm overwhelmed. And then there's this gentleman, David Ritz, who's done over 60 books, and he did Don Rickles' book, number One-on-One with Rickles, with Ray Charles. He's done, I think this is his 3rd book, One-on-One with Willie Nelson. They did Paul Schaefer's book. So I didn't know David. I reached out to him. He was one of the 6 people. And yeah, forgot the messages. David was just very intrigued. He had never done a book, and he's done 60 some books on a figure that he had never met before. He had never met Johnny. And he never had somebody like me reach out to him. And we talked on the phone a bunch of times, and it just seemed like, let's see what happens. I mean, we just really connected, and the book never would have happened without him. I mean, it was his name alone and his literary agent that got us the book deal. It never would have happened. And he was just wonderful to talk me through this, because even having him, I was overwhelmed. And it was just a very challenging process, but he was just wonderful. So that's how the book came about.
That's great.
Yeah.
And how long did it take then, from when you got the new idea with him, to actually sit down and take the hundreds of interviews that you have and compile them into the book? How was it 4 years?
Oh goodness. I think by the time we got a publisher on, I think it was about 4 years originally.
Wow.
We signed a contract saying 18 months. I was like, this isn't going to happen. And they were so wonderful. They said, Mark, take as much time as you want. And we didn't want to take too much time. And then, it just happened with the book, 2 days before Johnny's 100th, what would have been his 100th birthday. So yeah, I mean, the good thing about about this book that I feel really good about is it's maybe 30, this is my guess, 30-40% my podcast, but 60% new information. I mean, I did a lot of new interviews and just so much research on a lot of questions I had that I wasn't able to get answered on the podcast necessarily. So I just did just big deep dives. Like this is a Saturday Night Live thing, but I found it fascinating. I did not know when I started, by the way, that I knew that the original cast of Saturday Night Live, that none of them were allowed on the show while they were cast members. But I didn't know that Belushi, I knew Belushi had made some trips over to the show and he was a fan of Johnny, but I had no idea that Steve Martin, when he was a guest host, Belushi did a cameo from the audience. Chevy Chase supposedly introduced his wife, and it cuts to Belushi in the audience. And I think the video exists somewhere. I've never seen it.
I didn't know that either until I read it in your book. I was like, I had no idea John Belushi did that.
And Chevy, the only reason Chevy was able to do it is because he wasn't a cast member anymore on SNL, and he had written Johnny a letter. Actually, it was an apology letter. He had just done they had this, it was Playboy. I think the cast was on the cover of Playboy, and they had interviewed everyone, and Chevy had said some things. He was, him and Johnny went back and forth a little bit in the press, and Chevy basically apologized for what he had said, what was about to come out in Playboy, and said, I would love to come on your show if you'll have me. And Johnny was gracious. He said, yeah. So they met the day before Chevy's first appearance. I think that was 1977. And then, before they know it, they're friends. They're playing poker. Their wives are hanging out, and they're friends. for life. So it has a happy ending, but Johnny never. I mean, there were definitely times where he enjoyed SNL, but I think overall he just wishes it would have gone away.
Do you think part of that was like generational for him, on top of being the competition for him?
Yeah, I definitely think like the cruel humor, the Michael O'Donoghue. I don't want to say it's subjective. It was cruel, but there was definitely things that he thought were too mean and too inappropriate that they were doing that maybe younger people like Robert Smigel would tells me so many times there's stuff that I wrote when I that got on the show that I would never do now that I'm horrified that I would write. And I think when sometimes people were younger, I think it was a generational thing. I definitely think the New York Magazine thing with them flaunting Chevy as a possible successor upset Johnny. I think that's part of it. But definitely, I mean, Robert Smigel told me it's one of his big regrets. And I think I put that in the book is the Saturday Night Live sketches or the Johnny Carson sketches with Dana Carvey. And, initially they were okay. In Carson's eyes, he showed part of when Carvey was on, they showed one of them. And then they just got to a point where Johnny was really fed up with it. I mean, there was only one or two people that were able to that kept going. One was Dennis Miller. He kept giving Dennis Miller bookings. I think Dennis had just left the show, but Dennis was loyal to Johnny. And then even Victoria Jackson appeared in one of those sketches, and then she was not allowed back. I don't think she did the show the last year or year and a half that she was on, because she was in one of those sketches. But yeah, that was definitely the Smigel sketches were something that he didn't understand. He's like, I don't talk like this. I don't do these things. Yeah, it was just NBC. He never told NBC, I don't want you to do this. He's like, we make fun of people all the time. I just don't understand it. I don't find them funny.
Fair.
I wanted to ask you, the book does a great job of kind of bouncing back and forth from the firsthand anecdotes from the stories that you had to just kind of a more traditional retelling of the past. And I was curious how much work you did post the podcast. Like you mentioned, you had a lot of new interviews. Did you interview new people, or were you going back to old people saying, I want to hit on more stuff?
Both, but I mean, I got Jay Leno for 50 minutes, which I really appreciate him talking to me because I couldn't get him for the podcast. I mean, originally he told me he was going to do the podcast. I wrote him a letter and he called me, but it didn't happen, and that's fine. But I got a bunch of new people, a bunch of old people that I had before with follow-ups, and just tried, especially with where I felt I had gaps within the podcast with questions I didn't have an answer for, or if there were like famous bits that were on the show, I wanted to know how the backstory of a lot of them. So it was just digging and lots of digging. So, I mean, the citations in this book, it's kind of embarrassing, but it's over 40 pages of just the citations in the back. I mean, it's a thick book to begin with, but I just wanted to, because I make some big claims and I just wanted people to see to see where they came from. But yeah, lots of research.
I gotta say, it reads so quick. You know what I mean? You mentioned it's a thick book, but it reads so well. Like you grab it doesn't feel like a thick book because you have so many of those stories. I think you guys do a really great job, like I was mentioning before, of intertwining the story and then the firsthand accounts. And you guys take the same kind of care to big event topics like Joan Rivers or the Tomorrow Show, as you do with the stuff you just mentioned, the little bits like the Orson Welles, Robert Blake episode, or Mark Summers, Burt Reynolds. Like everything's kind of given the same attention to detail, and it's just so much fun to read.
Yeah, it was tough cutting some of the details down because I'm a detail person, as you know, from reading the book and my podcast. And I mean, everything did get in. There was just a little bit more I wanted to put in, but it was something like the Joan Rivers Johnny. The media might label it a feud. Johnny wouldn't have labeled it a feud. Maybe a betrayal privately, but there is so much stuff that people did not know about that I didn't know, and I feel like it's one of, maybe if it's not the best, it's one of the best explanations of why Johnny never talked to Joan Rivers again. And I really wanted to put it all there. And for anybody like that, I've heard people in the media and really smart people be like, oh, it's, she never told Johnny, Johnny never told her again, end of story. It's as simplistic as one sentence or two sentences. And it was so much more than that. And I lay that out there. And I mean, I think, yeah, it was out there also that I guess Tom Snyder and Johnny didn't really care for each other. But I go into that like on what the specifics were. So it's a lot of stuff that maybe people know about, but I just I tried to lay it out for people to understand. Wayne Newton and versus Johnny.
Oh, yeah.
Why Wayne Newton, of course, he waited till Johnny passed away before he made his claims because Johnny couldn't sue. And I really was intrigued with that. I tried to talk to Wayne Newton. I tried to talk to Joan Rivers when she was alive. I met her a couple times. She was very nice. Couldn't get either of them. But yeah, I just wanted to go into those stories and just put everything out that I could find with research.
Well, I mean, I will say Brad just said this, but reading the Joan Rivers part, that was something like you said, I knew high level what it was and I understood it, or so I thought, but then reading your book and what you had to say about it and how deep you went with it and told really the entire story, I was very impressed by that. And it really was something that I had never known about.
It's really hard because I think Miss Rivers had good intentions, and she deferred to her husband Edgar, who he produced the Fox talk show, and a lot of bad decisions stemmed from him, and she was loyal to him, and it did her in. It really was not good. But I go into it. It was tough. I don't think it seems to me from when she was in an interview, she never got over that with Johnny. That Johnny never forgave her. I mean, Johnny was very much like, I mean, his biggest thing was loyalty from talking to the people that knew him for years. And if it was real or perceived, if somebody was not loyal to him, he'd just cut off the relationship. It wasn't a feud. I mean, I remember she was scheduled to do David Letterman's show, and Johnny produced the show and kept the booking, and she was the one that said, I'm not feeling funny these days, and canceled. And then they asked her to keep coming back, and finally a couple days later she made like an unscheduled cameo. But I mean, it was just Johnny, didn't book her back on and didn't talk about her. But she makes it out to be like, NBC banned me from late night for decades until Jimmy Fallon. I'm like, you went on Conan twice, that was NBC. You went on Later with Bob Costas, that was NBC. There was no ban. Leno didn't put her on, but that wasn't Johnny. Johnny could have cared less if Jay would have put her on. Dave Letterman eventually put her on. It took a while, but yeah, it just, Johnny had personal issues, and he didn't feel like he needed to give the public this whole explanation. Miss Rivers, put out to the press all these things that she accused of NBC and Johnny, and he just didn't, he said, she said, he's like, I don't need I don't need it. Somebody asked him in the audience, he would take questions after the monologue sometimes, and somebody asked him right after this happened, and he was heartbroken, but somebody asked him, what do you think of Miss Rivers or Joan Rivers going to Fox? And he's like, I wish her all the best. That's the extent that he said. I think after her show was canceled, or she was removed from the Fox show, I mean, he never mentioned her ever in an interview. He never talked about her on air. It's just like she didn't exist. I think that was his defense mechanism. He was very easily hurt, very sensitive, and if somebody betrayed him like that, or he perceived it, they just didn't exist in his mind.
Another thing I really enjoyed reading and reminding myself about, that people may either be too young to know, or it's been so long they don't remember, but you spend a good deal of time talking about after Johnny makes the move to Burbank and exactly how important he and the show was to an entire generation of stand-up comedians. Like what it meant to, I mean, you could write a book just on the struggles of people getting on the show, of comedians trying to get on the show, and then what the show meant to them, either good or bad. It was really fun to revisit all those people.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, it was people that like Kevin Nealon and certain people I got to get together with. I mean, Nealon, I think, like Jerry Seinfeld, still says it was the biggest moment of his career, even bigger than Saturday Night Live going on Carson. Hearing stories like Kevin Nealon would tell me he would move to LA and he would just go to the Tonight Show audience and anyone have an extra ticket, and he went like 20 times, he told me. And just to hear those stories and just I really didn't know, and I put this in about how much Dave Letterman, I mean, he got rejected a few times, and just to tell the people's stories, like Jerry Seinfeld, when he did Carson for the first time, his dad, Cal Seinfeld in Long Island, was he like had all these signs on his van. My son Jerry's going to do Carson, and took out a classified ad, and just all the backstory of what happened with a lot of these with a lot of the comedians. And unfortunately, some of them were banned. Kevin Nealon's not in the book banned. He's talked about that many times. He talked about drinking and driving, and John, that was something that the show didn't want. And Johnny had been arrested a few years prior for drinking and driving, but pleaded no contest. But yeah, I think for the most part, you'll hear a lot of comedians, like people like Stephen Wright said, it was the biggest moment that they've ever had. So, yeah.
Well, it's so far removed that you can imagine like someone going on any show and the next day them just being catapulted to like a Freddie Prinze Jr. Who else? Drew Carey and this. Who else is in the book? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Freddie Prinze.
Those stories just like literally overnight become stars.
I mean, definitely Freddie Prinze was the closest to and like him going on the show until he had a number one show was I think like 6 months or something. It was really quick.
Crazy.
I talk about the evolution of that. I know like someone like Drew Carey. I mean, just everybody wanted to be in the Drew Carey business, and I know people would get these development deals, and Roseanne Carsey Warner watching one of her Carson specials or one of her Carson appearances. It was one of those things where today doing those late night shows is still a huge accomplishment, but it just doesn't have the impact. It's very, very different, obviously. But Johnny was such a champion of the comedians, and we go into that. And just the fact he was secure enough to have guest hosts. Some of those people will never have guest hosts on their show that are stand-ups that would never give their show over to somebody. I mean, Letterman, when he had health issues, would do it, but other than that, he wouldn't. And Jay did it once with Katie Couric, of all people, and he told me he didn't want to do it, but NBC made him. But yeah, Johnny was generous like that.
It was a different time too, right? Like Johnny had, he had competition, but not really. Like he was always number one or the only one.
He was number one. I mean, I go into the book in 1971. He had an apartment at the UN Plaza building, and it's like Bobby Kennedy lived there, Truman Capote, all these famous people. And he has this apartment, and he has 4 TVs lined up, and at 11:30, they're all tuned. One is to his Tonight Show at 11:30, so he's watching his own show that he just recorded hours earlier. Dick Cavett is at 11:30. David Frost, and it's like maybe it's Merv Griffin, but it's or Joey Bishop. So he's watching all 4 shows like a professional football coach studying this stuff. So there were times that he did have some competition here and there, but he was just nobody put a dent. I mean, Arsenio did well. Didn't do bigger ratings than Johnny, but it was a different audience and did well. But that was maybe the closest to somebody actually making an impact in Johnny's ratings. But it was Carson didn't change who he was booking in the audience for that with Arsenio, and he really stayed true to his audience for 30 years and was on top for 30 years. It's amazing.
One of the things I found interesting, we've been talking a lot about the Tonight Show, and something I knew nothing of, and you do a good bit of the book of this, is talking about Johnny Carson himself, like the entertainer. How he obviously but how he never was in movies. There's a story I know you tell at one point in the book. He was offered I think $1 million to do a movie, and I know he hosted the Oscars a few times, but aside from that, that's all he chose to do, right? Was the Tonight Show and a random hosting gig from time to time.
He was afraid to do anything that he might not be as good at as hosting the Tonight Show. He didn't like to do things that he wasn't good at, and he tried to do a movie once with Connie Francis, and he just could not. The whole process of waiting around and filming your scene, he just didn't like that. So yeah, they offered him Steve McQueen's role in forget what movie it was. I have to go into it in the book, but I mean, he was offered a lot. I mean, he turned down Irving Swifty Lazar, big entertainment mogul, came on the show and offered him a check for $1 million for, I forget how many weeks work, but no, he turned it down. But yeah, like the Oscars was like the one time where he was nervous. The people would say, the writers, it was the only time right before the monologue. And after he got through the monologue, he was fine. But I can't even imagine this. He's the only person I know of that hosted the Oscars, and I can't imagine this happening now. That he would go out there he would choose to go out like this. No teleprompter, no cue cards. He memorized everything so he could edit in his head if he wanted to try. If a joke he didn't think like this type of joke wasn't working, he could try something else. He took a memory course. And he was so brave to go to the Academy Awards and out there. And he clashed with the director, Marty Pacetta, famous Oscars director and producer. And Pacetta, liked to do cutaways. And Johnny's like, no, keep the camera on me. And they just kind of clashed. But a lot of people to this day say Carson was the best Oscars host. I mean, he was really good. I think he did it 4 or 5 times.
Going out there without cue cards or teleprompter or anything is just, that shows you how comfortable he was, and also brilliant, and just able to pivot. Like you said, if something's not working, all right, skip that joke, let's move to something else and do it on the fly.
It was like, and also I think it was one of the first times they ever had a host of the Oscars that was not a movie person, that didn't have a tie to being in lots of movies. So it was that was definitely an issue for him. He's like, are they going to accept me? Now it's like, if they'll put anybody as a comedian on, it doesn't matter if they're a TV star or what, but yeah, he was really, really good, and people try to get him to keep hosting the Oscars, but he did a great job for 5 times, and that's what he did. And I thought he did a really solid job.
Yeah, 5 times is a lot, but
yeah, 4 or 5, I forget what it is. I should know. I wrote a book about him. Yeah.
Mark, let's talk about some specific stories from the book.
Sure.
And your conversation, I guess, is all born out of the podcast and everything. But what was one of your conversations that kind of was most surprising to you, either in the way that the person loved Johnny, like you said, or some stories that they had about him that you were just kind of, totally thrown for a loop on?
I really liked talking to the New York staff, the people that knew him in the 60s. One was his assistant, Ginny Beauregard, and just, they stayed in touch for decades up until Johnny passed away, and just how loyal he was as a friend, and just kind of just to hear stories that kind of I wasn't surprised about, but just kind of were things that just I could add in I don't think I put this in the book, but like this is an example of Johnny. He was in Nebraska he grew up most of his life in Norfolk, and that never left him. She told me this story. I don't think I put it in the book, but it definitely supports who Carson was as a person in the book. Is instead of like when his home was being refurbished at the UN Plaza, instead of hotels, he just stayed in his office at NBC and slept there. And like the janitor opened the door to vacuum and like started like screaming. They were so scared they didn't realize it was Carson just there. That was very Carson. Just very meat and potatoes, simplistic guy. And I just really liked hearing the people that knew him. They just told me he was just, didn't need anything fancy, and was just at heart. I mean, he would, for a long time, he would just brown paper bag sack lunch to NBC Burbank, and that was him. And I liked hearing those stories from the people that knew him.
Was there a holy grail question that you never got during the podcast, and in researching the book, you're like, I really want to find the answer to this, that you found out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there were, getting back to the one thing I forgot to mention, is talking to people and realizing Johnny had friends. He actually had friends, which was media made him out to be this loner, and he was an introvert. I'm an introvert. I have friends. Carson had friends. But in terms of what was it, a holy grail of
like something that you in researching the book, you finally got an answer to something you've been wanting to know for years.
I'll say Johnny's first show, for example. I really wanted to know what happened. And yet Mel Brooks, who was there, gave me an account. I've talked to some other people, but just doing research, we were just talking about the Oscars. I found this very interesting. I don't know, but Johnny's very first interview, and like it was 6 months of all this hype leading up to Johnny taking over for Jack Parra, who was one of the biggest TV stars, and this unknown, this game show host. Can he do it? It's his very first time interviewing somebody, and it was this who was it? It was Rudy Valley, who was on Broadway, a big star, and like minutes in, there was this gentleman who a year or two earlier crashed the Oscars. He snuck in and ran up on stage when Bob Hope was presenting and gave him like an honorary fake Oscar named Stan Berman. He was a New York cabbie. He was like in his 30s. And he was arrested, I think, at the Oscars. But he was famous for showing up at the JFK inaugural and being with the Kennedys in their box and getting his photo with the Kennedys. He snuck into the Waldorf Astoria, and he had interactions with Queen Elizabeth while she was in her 20s, danced with Princess Grace at Monaco. This guy wears a beard and gets by NBC security. He's in the audience. And there was so little security that Stan Berman actually went down through the audience and just disrupted the taping during Johnny's very first interview, which would throw anybody off. But Carson was such a pro and knew the show was done in real time. Unless it's an emergency, they're not going to stop taping, and they didn't. And Johnny just, paused and said, you know what, we're doing something. If you could leave, I'd really appreciate it, and acknowledged it. And the critics were like, Carson handled it beautifully. He made a joke, maybe we need to change the locks or something on the studio. But yeah, just to have your concentration thrown so much on your very first episode, I thought he did a really good job. But to me, just hearing some of those type of stories for show number one, I really did like to hear that. And then I'm trying to think of some of the other. I knew that Carson, and I felt I had a strong case to talk about this in the book, because Johnny would struggle with his drinking, and he would talk about his alcohol issues, but I really didn't know that much. I knew a little bit, but I thought I was telling, just because this is classic Johnny. Just he'd be completely fine, and then he would have one extra drink, and he said he would turn into Attila the Hun. And he went to the Copacabana once when Jerry Vale it was his opening night with all these other comedians. And Johnny actually referenced it on the show and said it was a jerky thing to do, but he was drunk out of his mind and just heckling Jerry Vale so much, back and forth. And it was this outrageous moment of him being there. And I just think those tales were interesting, just to kind of like on what really happened and how much of a problem Carson really did have with that. And Jerry Vale did say Johnny, whenever they ran into each other for decades, would just apologize for that night about what went on. And I think also I really like talking to Irving Davis, who held the curtain open for Johnny. That he was in the podcast. I guess I talked to him a little bit for the book as well. That wasn't in the podcast, but just hearing those stories about what Johnny was like. He was very loose and having fun, smoking a cigarette, telling jokes. Whereas a lot of those late night hosts just need complete silence. And that's rightfully so, whatever it takes for somebody to go out and do the show. But I loved hearing those inside stories.
Well, we should say the book is written in 3 parts, Johnny's 3 decades on the Tonight Show. Do you have a favorite decade of the 3 decades? Would you, if you had to pick one?
I think in terms of the work, I feel like the strongest work was probably the 70s. I think, and maybe in New York when Johnny would go to do the show in Los Angeles. There is some footage that exists, and those LA trips were so over the top wild compared to anything I've ever seen. It was almost like a party. There was drinking, there was smoking. But I think the 70s in terms of the comedy, I really like, though, and I know that maybe probably the work wasn't as strong, but I really like him in the 80s and the 90s, just because he doesn't have as much energy to do the show, so he's only doing the show like the last couple of years 3 nights a week. But there's just something about him slowing down as an interviewer that I just really, I don't know, really like his interviewing during those years, and just there's something just really just touching and gracious about the guy during those years that I personally like a lot. But I definitely think if people are going for the funniest work, I think it was 70s.
It definitely becomes a different type of interview as he's older. And I think he goes from interviewing his peers to really being the older statesman, and people defer to him, and it's
I think
just a
it was
different
hard.
tone.
Yeah. I think it was very hard, and I understand it. Where I talk to people that were, our age, that, I mean, you see Dave Letterman at 12:30, who Carson produced, and it was so innovative and so fresh, and every critic is like, Dave. It's hard for Carson. He had a couple, like a year or so, where he was trying to do Dave style bits, and they were hard to watch, and he never pulled them off. And I think he really resented that. I mean, he loved Dave Letterman as a person and would put him on the show all the times, and just, really respected Dave. But I think that was hard for him. And I think anything that becomes an institution that's there is going to be a punching bag at some point, and just people start to take it for granted. And I think he felt that a little bit. But I definitely think that, I mean, it's just interesting now, because like the people that were kids when they were on it now are in their 50s. I mean, people like Jason Bateman, when Sammy Davis Jr. dedicated a song to Jason Bateman when he was a kid, and now talking to people like that, Drew Barrymore, when they were kids and stuff. So yeah, I had to constantly remind myself when I was writing this book, at this point, the show's been off the air for 33 years. It does not feel that. I was 16 when the show went off the air, and it doesn't feel that. I remember watching it where I was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and it just doesn't feel that way. And I think it says a lot about Carson's work that he's been off the air that long, and that people are still talking about him. All the late night shows mention him. He still makes news, and people just miss him, and they miss the show.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that like you said, there's 1 million people that subscribe to the official Johnny Carson YouTube channel, and that says a lot there.
I think so. I mean, they can't get enough. People have asked me about, because I cover a lot of the stuff I cover on the show is not available to the public. I was able to view it through some other means, but I go into a lot of moments. But yeah, it's just people can't get enough.
I have 2 more questions for you, Mark.
Sure.
I think they're easy questions.
Okay.
Well, I've got 2, so you hold on to your one.
I'm sure one of them's mine.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite guest with Carson that of all time that you've watched? Maybe someone that's come on multiple times, but who was it?
The one that I love the most, just because it was a little bit like professional wrestling, and I was into wrestling when I was a teenager, before comedy. I was really, really into comedy, was Charles Grodin, because he would go on in character, and I could, my suspicion is that it wasn't real, but they would get so much mail that people thought it was real. Why, Johnny, why do you have Charles Grodin? Why be so rude to you? Why would you put him on? And when I had Grodin on, I went to Connecticut twice with him. He's like, Mark, no, people thought it was real. He's like, I would go on Letterman and say all these terrible things, and they'd get mail, and people would not understand. But he was really he was playing like a heel wrestling villain on that show. And it was wonderful. And Johnny would take it. Johnny loved it. He signed a contract under one point to be exclusive with the show. And I just thought it was that. I always looked forward to that, especially because he would just give Johnny a hard time, and there was definitely the audience couldn't necessarily tell if it was real or not. And just saying, so it's such inappropriate stuff that no one would say on a talk show. And he was just great. He was going on in characters himself, kind of like Stephen Colbert had the Colbert Report, where he would go on in character as Stephen Colbert. So yeah, I really enjoyed Grodin. I thought that was some of my favorite moments.
That's great. Brad, what was your question? Was that your question?
That was my one question. My other one was, aside from favorite guest, do you have a favorite bit, a favorite Johnny Carson bit from
that? Was my other question.
Oh my goodness. I think like my current one that I really like, and I write about in the book, but it's not available, is them singing holiday songs. It's like Christmas thing, and it's like Johnny, Pat McCormick, Ed, and I think Tommy Newsom maybe, and the 4 of them. It's like a spoof of Christmas specials. They have like kind of like the winter wonderland in the back, and there's snow that's falling as they sing these Christmas carols, and they just keep singing the carols, and they don't acknowledge anything, and the snow's falling, and then the snow starts falling a little bit faster and a little bit faster, and then it's just like, oh my goodness, a ridiculous amount. And by the time like they're covered up to here, and they're sitting in chairs and lawn chairs with like the scarf and the heavy jacket, and this, And it's like, then they it's like up to there and the snow doesn't stop and it's wonderful. And then I didn't realize this, but then shortly after, and then the next night they said that they were panicking because there was, I forget the material that they would use for fake snow, what it's called, poly something, but it was like going up their nose and they were having trouble breathing. And Carson said he was like finding that stuff in his clothes for days. And but I really, really like that was, I for whatever reason, I just really love that sight gag and the fact that they committed to it. And Pat McCormick is always fun to watch, but I like that a lot.
That's good.
I remember reading that in the book. Yeah, that was a good story.
Yeah, I really got a kick out of that.
It's funny you mentioned the perception the media gives off of Johnny being a recluse, and I thought you guys did a really good job. And again, I think it's the way the book is written. It was really easy to read when you get into his retirement, because I think you kind of kicked that segment off about everyone thinks he's a recluse and he's going to go into hiding and never going to see him. And so it's a nice way to end the book of his retirement and just what he did with himself and what he was looking to do.
Yeah, I always say he didn't retire. People think he left for good show business in May of '92 when he left the Tonight Show, but he did 2 solid years where he went to The Simpsons. He did the American Teacher Awards. He did Bob Hope's 90th birthday. He was presented the Presidential Medal of Freedom by George Herbert Walker Bush. He did the Kennedy Center and honors. He was honored. There were the Dave Letterman cameo was probably the most famous one. So, and then it was then the rest of the time, which I don't think really has been written about that much. I mean, he was having lunches with his writers. He liked his alone time on his boat for sure. He was definitely an introvert and liked his alone time. But at the same time, he was he was going to different countries. He went to Africa with Jim Fowler, who was a longtime guest on the show. And Johnny took 2 of his sons and his wife and was just out and about. Bob Wright, who was president of NBC, they palled around with the wives and they went all around. So, I definitely think that was definitely kind of a mystery of what went on during the retirement years. And I was able to fill in some gaps.
Mm-hmm. Mark, we kind of went through what we really liked in the book, stuff that stood out for us. Are there any things we didn't mention that you really like that you want to bring up for people without giving too much away?
Oh. Yeah, the book covers so many years and so much time period. It's hard to kind of pinpoint, but I feel like I'm happy with the book. I feel like that we told the story well. I think people that like Johnny Carson, they'll learn a lot, and people that don't, I feel like it works for people that are nerds like myself that know a lot about comedy, and then maybe other people that are just discovering Carson. I mean, I still can't get over. I mean, the official Johnny Carson YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers, has over 700 videos that have an average of 1 million plus views per video. I mean, there's just this big appetite for Carson fans, but I feel good telling the story. I would have loved to have talked to Lorne Michaels a bit. I know Lorne would always try to get Johnny to host the show, and I know Lorne was conflicted about the sketches with the Smigel rope, but every single time, and I think that's why he lasted for 50 years, he would back the writers, even if he didn't necessarily like the piece or agree with the piece. I feel like we did a good job conveying the Saturday Night Live stuff in the book. So, yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's nice to see you both. Thank you.
This book is amazing. It's such a great read.
So nice. I appreciate it.
We will we'll put a link in the show notes, but do your plug, sir. Where can people find this?
If people want the book, it's available. Love Johnny Carson is Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Books A Million, Walmart, Target. Believe it or not, some people have asked for signed copies, and I'm going to be going over actually in a couple days to the Astoria Bookshop. So the Astoria Bookshop is selling signed copies. If you want to get that from them, support local bookstores is good. And I'd be grateful. Yeah, I still can't believe the book is when this is out. Yeah, that it's out. And
if you're in New York tonight, where are we going? Where am I seeing you tonight?
Yeah, tonight on the 23rd. I am going to be at Book Culture at 7 p.m. signing books, talking about my book. Please come out. Book Culture is on 112th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam here in New York City and Manhattan. I'm going to be doing some other events. I'm actually going to be going to Nebraska, to Norfolk,
nice.
where Johnny's from. They're going to have me out. I'm going to be going to Chicago to do an event, and hopefully there'll be more. So we shall see. But thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. And I'm thrilled you both liked the book.
Yeah.
Oh no, we couldn't say enough. Like I said, admittedly, not a big Johnny Carson fan. I'm kind of, as you mentioned, the person who might not know a lot about it. And I loved, because there's so many people you do know that you don't lose track of the story. It's just so easy to follow because the name will pop in, or an event that I remember from 30, 40 years ago will pop in.
Oh, sure.
So it's a great book. So if you are not the biggest Johnny Carson fan in the world, I would still recommend this book. If you're a fan of comedy, if you're listening to us, it's such a fun read.
Thank you very much.
It really
this
is
was fun.
Mark, thank you. Congratulations on this.
Man, congrats.
This is an amazing achievement. So,
I really appreciate that. I just think I need a week nap, and then I'll be pleasant again. And I'm trying to get my social skills up. Like, this has really been helping, because for 4 years, it has not been good. Christine, my wife, thanks you for helping me through this difficult time.
thanks for listening to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. Look for us on social media everywhere at NR4PT Project. The Not Ready for Primetime Project team includes Brad Robinson and Gary Seath. Our announcer is Jason Taylor, and the original music by Jacob Spiewak. I just have a question. You mentioned you know Carson better than you know your wife. Do you preface every gift you ever give her with, Johnny would have loved this?
I should. I really should do that. I would know what to get Johnny more than my wife. Her birthday's coming up, and I'm just like, what do I get? But if it was Carson, I would know what magic book to get or something on astronomy. But
perhaps your wife would like the final Johnny Carson curtains, which I believe are currently on sale.
Oh yes, they are currently being
maybe
bid
maybe she
upon.
would like that. I don't know.
We'll see. I might have to write another book to pay for that, but maybe she will. That would be, she would. I would love to see her face on that one.